We've talked about the behaviour of the shoulder turn in the backswing. That's the ignition point of the takeaway. The first hinge, the left shoulder ignites. Quite naturally, the forearms then continue to rotate. So you've understood the mix of forearm rotation and shoulder turn. So let's just talk about the wrist that we did mention earlier, but let's go into a bit more detail. It won't be a surprise to you that if the arm hangs naturally, the club runs out of the forearm at a certain angle. And if I turn to you, you can see that's the shaft and the left arm in one line. That's where you want to be with the driver, 6-iron wedge. But that line is straight. A lot of people think that straight left arm and they do that. No, the left arm is in line. You can see it from there, that's in line. But from the side, there is a wrist angle. So have a guess how many degrees you're going to finish up with between the forearm, the angle between the forearm and the shaft. The answer, of course, is 90 degrees. Now, if your thumb was long, ladies are prone to do this, then you will overhinge the wrist. But we're not made like that. We're made with the tip of the thumb level with the first joint of the index finger. So if we hold the club thus, then we get 90 degrees of wrist hinge. So you can have a golf swing that's in plane, and I can get you to swing non-wristy or wristy. Amazingly, the plane isn't affected. And I can tell you categorically that if you have wrist hinge back and wrist hinge through in your iron play, you'll be more accurate than if you don't. Bryson DeChambeau has taken as much moving parts out of his golf swing as he can with clubs the same length and high hands. However, he has no wrist cock now, and that means the forearms can still flip and roll. If Bryson had an element of wrist hinge going back and going through, the ball wouldn't pull to left under pressure. You see, if clubs are meant to be all the same length, that's how they've done it 200 years ago. Go and look at clubs in the museum at Troon, St Andrews. They're all of variable length, not dissimilar to the length clubs are today, because as human beings we stay pretty much the same height and shape over the last couple of hundred years. So wrist hinge happens for a reason. You don't have much wrist hinge with a driver, you've got loads of wrist hinge with a wedge. So let me just flatten the explainer, and I'm going to just bring it down so that I'm simulating a driver swing. I just check that it's through my sternum, which it is. Okay, so when I turn my shoulder, you can see my forearm rotating and the wrists have hinged, but very quietly. So there's only a tiny little bit of wrist hinge to find with a driver, but what you can see is if the wrists are quiet, the forearms are notably more accurate, and that's where distance comes from. Forearm rotation through impact. Wrists help accuracy, but the driver, it's not really about that. You're hitting the 35, 40-yard fairway. It's about shoulder and forearms. The wrist hinge is there, but it's very quiet. If I go then to the short power roller, look how much I've got to crank the swing. I've got to bring it right up here to simulate a wedge movement. So here we go, bottom of the grip. Check that I'm through my sternum. Now look, I've got to find the most wrist hinge in the least amount of time. So all of a sudden, as I'm turning my shoulder, my wrists are hinging. You can see that I've got wrist cock of 90. When I come through, if you've got a flag left and water or trouble left, if you wrist jam, you're probably going to pull it or block it. Allow your wrists to hinge in the backswing. So here's an explainer drill. Put the feet close together and just practice left arm and wrist. See if you can just build that up. Okay, it's not a long swing, it's wristy. There. So that's a great way to practice your pitching. Chipping is non-wristy. Chipping would be more like this. This would be chipping. This would just be shoulder and a hint of forearm. But when you're pitching and bunker play, wrist hinge is essential for accuracy and for speed. You can do the same drill with your right hand only. As you turn, your wrist hinges. Then you come through. Okay, let's put the hands together. They work as a unit. Hinge to hinge. And that is all that you need. So there we have it. We've built the swing up in 3 stages. You have to start with the shoulder coil. That's half the swing. You've then got to allow the forearms to rotate in the backswing. That takes you 3/4 of the swing. And when you add then that missing piece of the wrist hinge, lo and behold, you've got the full swing required. Half the swing was your shoulder turn, 1/4 was your forearm rotation, and 1/4 was your wrist. Remember also, I've done you a special deal, 3 for the price of 2. If you hinge your wrist and turn your shoulder, you get your forearms for free. When you've got treble left and the flag left, wrist hinge is your salvation. If you don't hinge the wrist, it allows the forearm to dominate and you can pull it and block it. Counterintuitive, but wrist action gives you more power, more speed, but guess what? You get more accuracy.